Who still listens on the fifth?
There's no one on there.
Hundreds. People around the world, thousands.
I will source or something.
I mean, thank you. It's like
All right. So today is Daf Ayin Test.
kind of way.
Tessie.
Tessie, Eileen, Tessie and Eileen, the neighbors.
But it's Darling.
Darlene. The Nusach change. Yeah.
Please don't forget to say
What? Yeah. So today is Daf Ayin Test. We left off in the bottom of Ayin Ches Amud Beis. 2 dots at the bottom. And away we go. So it's a quote from the Mishnah. We had the Mishnah, the beginning of the parak, of the 8th parak in Yom Kippurim. We're on the bottom of Ayin Ches Amud Beis. So the Mishnah says when describing the different shiurim of what is considered to be, we know Yom Kippur is a halacha of inui, right? Halacha is one has to go ahead and inflict inflictions upon himself on the 10th day of Tishrei, as we saw from the Psukim. And one of the inflictions is withholding from eating and drinking. So it says over there, I think it's Ein Daled Beis, yeah. So the pasuk, the Mishnah says Ha'eichel Kuseves Hagasa. So it says over there, one who goes ahead and eats a Kuseves Hagasa, a large, right? It's referring to a large date. And Kamo Kugurianasta, right? Like it and its pit, right? Like it and its pit. So it's a very strange lashon, right? It says it like one Kuseves Hagasa, Kamo Kugurianasta, right? Like it and its pit. So it's asked the Gemara on the bottom of Ayin Ches Amud Beis. Boy Rav Papa asks a question for this lashon. That which it says in the Mishnah, Kuseves Sha'amru, when it says a large pit, right? That which we say, is it begarnisa or below garnisa? Is it with its pit or without its pit? In other words, does it mean a large pit and or a large date, excuse me, which is equal to a regular date and its pit? Or does it mean basically a large date with its pit inside? So that was the question. The lashon is very strange. That's right. Is the pit included? Because it says like a large date, like it and its pit. So does it mean a large date is equal to a regular date with its pit, or does it mean a large date with its pit inside? And we'll soon get to what the shear is. And similarly, by Rav Ashi, etzem kisaira, we have another halacha when it comes in Chazal that a bone is like the size of a sa'ira, right? It's the size of a barley. And when it comes to a barley, is it with its shell or without its shell? Is it wet? Is it dry? Right? No, it makes a difference. What is the actual size of the sword? So now Rav Papa asks a question and Rav Ashi asks a question. Rav Papa asks by our case, by the case of the date, and Rav Ashi asks by the case of the barley. Now Rav Ashi the Rav Papa. Right, it has a shell, and he asks about whether it's wet or dry, right? Whether it be large or dry. So Rav Ashi wasn't bothered by the lashon of our Mishnah. He didn't ask that question of Rav Papa. Why? Because Gasa Itamar, Kol Kaman de Gasa. It's going to him since it says the word Gasa. It means the largest. So what is the largest? It means a large date with its pit. And Rav Papa Rav Ashi, and Rav Papa did not ask it, which Rav Ashi asked in terms of what type of sa'ira. Why? Because Lacha Shibolas Mikri. If it is a barley, right, which is moist, which is still wet, that is called a shibolas. It's not called a sa'ira. So therefore, it's obviously now referring to one which is wet. It's dry. And shlo b'kipasa ushla mikri. And without its shell, it's called ushla, but it wasn't called ushla. So obviously, this is referring to one with its shell. So therefore, according to Rav Papa, it was with its shell, and it was talking about a dry one. Fine. Middle of the page, Omar, I assume it says Rabba, yeah. So Omar Rabba, Omar Rav Yehuda, Chayseves, and we're going to have 2 different shitas over here. Omar Rav Yehuda, Chayseves, Hagasa, Sha'amru, Yisera, Mi, Kibetza. The Chayseves Hagasa that we're talking about is larger than a Kibetza. Okay, so now remember, there's sort of 3 shirim when it comes to size, right? We talk about a kazayas, size of an olive, all right? Then there's the size of a kibetza, an egg, right, which is larger than an olive, right? And now we're throwing in this new size of a date. So the question is, date, where does it come? Is it less than a kazayas, more than a kazayas, more than a kibetza? What's going on there? So he says, so the first opinion, Shem Rav Yehuda is Kasevas Hagas Shamru Yiser Mekabetza. The Kimlu Rabbanan, the Vahachi Miasve Daite. The Timiakilam Miasve Daite. Now, more than this or less than this, right? Now, if you actually look at, I'll explain to you, we'll just read Rashi for a second, right? Sure, Rashi's. So the amount of shit that one has to go ahead and eat on Yom Kippur is something which inflicts pain upon himself, right? Which is, so in other words, if it's something, it might not make you full, but at least if you have this, you're no longer in pain and hunger pains, right? Rav Ashi says, I'm just reading from Rashi. Even though every time that in the Torah when it says a shir of achila, referring to a kazayis, that's what it's talking about achila. About hachah when it comes to Yom Kippurim, right? A tunaksim, right? It says you should be inflicted. And so long as the person is not, he doesn't have yishuv adas, he's not settled, that's called inui. So the shear of eating on Yom Kippur is not a shear of satiating, is not a shear, a minimum shear of achila, of a kazayas. Rather, it's a shear of what will basically remove the hunger pains, right? And therefore, that shear is the amount of a kaseves, of this date. And it's more than a kibetza. So Meisvei, Asukasha, Maisa, baby, the Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Litam as a tafshil. One time they brought the Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai to go ahead and taste a tafshil, a certain dish. And Uluram Gamliel, so that you can, that part is not going to be important. Here's the next part. Uluram Gamliel, Shtei Kaseves, Vidali Shemayim. And they brought to Rabbi Gamliel 2 dates and a pitcher of water. But Amru, and they said, Halum Sukkah. Right? And they said, let's go eat in the sukkah. Right? You're eating, let's go eat in the sukkah. The Tani Allah, not because that was a halacha, but rather they want to be machmer. So you see over here that something the size of 2 dates does not require a sukkah. Okay? When they gave to Rabbi Tzadok, he gave Rabbi Tzadok, he ate less than a kibetza, and therefore he made sure to eat less than a kibetza, right? And natlu the mappa, right? And he took it with the mappa. In other words, he didn't require, even though he did not require of washing one's hands, and natlu b'mappa because it was less than a kibetza. And he also did not make a bracha achrona. It was not the shear of benching. It was not the shear of eating. Now, turn the page. Kibetza. But if it was the size of a kibetza, then by a sukkah. It would have required a sukkah. All right. Now, on one hand, one person, right? Number 2, Rav Gamliel had 2 dates, did not require a sukkah. That's what we know he ate. And the Rabbi Tzadok had less than a kibetza, and that did not require a sukkah. Now, if you think that a date is larger than a kibetza, well, it doesn't make sense. If you're saying that a date with its pit is greater than a kibetza, so how could it be that 2 dates without their pits, even if you want to say that the 2 dates that he without this is not more than a kibetza? Let's see. Huge pits. Let's see. Some Rabbi Yirmiyah if you have 2 dates and you remove their pits, the amount of meat or whatever it is on that is less than a kibetza. So therefore, that which he ate 2 didn't require a sukkah. And kosevas hagasa, however, when it comes to kosevas hagasa, we're going to saw. But however, if you have a large date with its pit, havi yisera mikabetza. That is more than a kibetza. And Amar Papa, like Papa says, people say, Trey Kavi de Tamri. If you take 2 kav of dates, right? You got at least a kav and plus of pits. In other words, so yes, actually the pit is more, right? The pit, let's say, is 55% of the volume of the dates, and therefore, I don't know, displacement if you put in the water, yeah. Right, because of sorry. So in Rav Omar, Hossam says, Rav says, no, you're actually distracted. That's not a good proof. Why is that? Rav Omar Hossam Hainatama Mishum the Havile Peirit. What are we talking about? They're eating fruits, right? Eating dates, right? And eating fruit itself does not require sukkah. So maybe you can say that dates are more than a kibetza, right? It's more than a kibetza, so he has to eat a sukkah? No, because it depends what you eat. If you're eating fruit does not require sukkah. It's not mazonos, or it's not bread, right? So therefore, it would require sukkah. So meisve, is that true? Well, that's another kasha from here. Amar Rabbi Kshayin, it's a Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. When we're learning Torah by Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Heviu lefenenu te'enim va'anovim ve'achalnu achilas arai chutzasuk. When we were learning over there by Rabbi Elazar and Shamua over Sukkos. They brought out in front of us figs and grapes, and we ate them in a achilas arai, in a casual manner, right? We didn't establish it as a meal. We ate it like as a snack, and we ate it outside the sukkah, sukkah. So achilas arayin, achilas kevalo. It sounds like only because they ate it as a snack, but had they eaten it as a meal, hey, let's sit down to to figs and grapes, it would have required a sukkah. So you see, fruit do require a sukkah. So no. Ema achilum ka'achilas arai chutz sukkah. We ate them just like one is allowed to go ahead and eat achilas arai chutz sukkah. One is allowed to go ahead and eat a mazonos snack or something. If he's eating less than a shear, if he's eating like a snack, then he's allowed to go eat that outside the sukkah, just like one who which would be similar to eating fruit. Or maybe we even ate the ta'enim and ovim over there, what it means they ate them at achilas keva. But we ate bread achilas arai. We also had achilas arai with it, and both of them were chutz sukkah because they did not require a sukkah. So far, we deflected the proofs of what we said in terms of having the the dates, to be more than a kibetza. So leiba masayle, let's say this is a proof. Lefichach in hishlim b'mini. Now we're going back on the in terms of the sukkah. What requires a sukkah? Can fruit require a sukkah? And we said no, maybe it's the fruit that does not require. So leiba masayle lefichach. Therefore, in hishlim b'mini targima yatsa. Therefore, if you also have it with mini targima, right, which is maybe some types of meat or something like that, you're eating along with it. If you go ahead, and you eat other food with it, then he has yatsa, right? Then he's yatsa over there in terms of eating in the sukkah. Right, so now that constitutes a meal. The Gemara over there was talking about what constitutes a meal. So if he goes ahead and supplements it with mina tagima, types of fruit, is yatsa. So over there it says he had fruits, and he had to go ahead and add, let's say, some meat. And if you would think fruits require sukkah, at least they peiros, right? Why doesn't it say if they want to be mashlim, bring out more fruits? Why does it say over there they brought out something else? It must be that fruits is no good to be mechayv sukkah. So Gemara says, no, my mina targima peiros. Maybe what does the mina targima mean? Maybe it means peiros. Maybe they brought out other fruits, and therefore that was that's considered to be a suda on the sukkah. If you say, we could say v'asro shchichi peiros. Maybe you're talking about a place of where there were no fruits, and they needed more food, and there was no fruit, so they brought out meat or whatever, eggs or whatever it is, to go ahead and finish the meal. Fine. So that was the first opinion we saw as to the size of a date, right? So that was the opinion of Rabba Amar Rav Yehuda, right? Who said that it was larger than an egg. Comes Rav Zvid. Zvid Omar Chayseves, smack him on the page of Ayin Testament base. Rav Zvid Omar Chayseves Hagasa Sha'amru Chasera Mikabetza. It's less than a kabetza. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Beishamay Imrim Saor Bekazayis Chametz Bekayseves. So when it comes to the Isser of chametz, of Bal Yiro, Bal Yimotze, when can I find it or see it, his own chametz, that shear, there is leaven. It's talking about leaven on Pesach. So over there, it's talking about sour. Sour is like sourdough. Sour is something that is able to go ahead and make other things chametz, right? That shear is a kazayas, all right? It's an olive. Chametz, but the Isser of chametz, something which is already leavened, right, which doesn't really have the ability to leaven other things, is the koseves. That's the size of a date. Now, and they ask over there, my time of the Beis Shammai. What's the reason for Beis Shammai? So nichtav rachmana chametz lo b'soor. If you just write chametz and you don't write the Isser of soor, v'anamina, and I would know ma chametz shem chimutza kasha asu bekazayis chametz, which doesn't really have the ability to make other things chametz. Its Isser is only the size of kazayis. So Sa'or, Shechemutza Kasha, but Sa'or, which has the ability to leaven other things, to make other things chametz, in other words, more machmer, is an obvious that it should make things usher with the kazayas. And by the fact that Rabbanan gave two different shirim, one for Sa'or and one for chametz, it teaches you that each one is a different shear, right? One is an olive and one is a kaseves, one is a date. Saor bekazayis, v'chametz kaseves. So the saor is like that of kazayis, and the chametz is kaseves. Now, and if you think kaseves hagasa is larger than an egg, so let's see. Beis Shammai ashura denafish mekazayis kamahadri. If Beis Shammai is looking for a shear which is larger than a kazayis, at least in a kabetza, let's say kabetza, right? What do you have to come on to? What do you have to come on to a date? Just say if it has to be, if chametz, which is Isser is achila, is the Isser is a kazayis, so we need something smaller, right? We need something smaller, right? For soor. And if you're saying, so if you're looking for something larger, it would have said kabetza, but it said something else. Binami or kiyadadin, even if it was the same, you say kabetza. Even if it was the same, kabetza and kaseves, they were the same, you should go ahead and state kabetza, because that's the more common shear. Elav shmamina kaseves pachusa mikabetza. Rather than that, you must conclude that the kaseves is actually less than a kabetza. So the Gemara deflects the proof and says, no, be mine. Dilma, perhaps maybe there's two different shir. There's a koseves hagasa, a large date, and a koseves. Over here, it doesn't say koseves hagasa, it just says koseves, right? So, a koseves hagasa is actually larger than an egg. Hastama, but over here, when it just says stam koseves, kabetza, right? Maybe over here when it's stopped, maybe then that would be smaller, less than a kabetza. Right? Or you could say even if they're the same, or even if you say that maybe they're the same shear. Why'd you pick kaseves over kabetza? Why not? Right? That doesn't mean that you can't prove it to me because I didn't use kabetza that that it has to be larger. Maybe they're the same size, and therefore it doesn't say. So elo mehacha. Rather, I'll bring you a different proof. So ad kama maz meaning, right? What is the shear where one has to go ahead and make a zim, right? It obligates him to go ahead and have a suda to bench afterwards. So ad kazayis di Rameir. Says Rameir, you need to eat kazayis of bread. Kazayis of bread, you got to go ahead and have a zimun. 3 people have it, they have a zimun. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad kabetza. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you have to eat a kabetza. So by kamifli, what is the machlokas over there? Rameir saver ve'achalta. The pasuk says ve'achalta v'savata v'rach. It says ve'achalta zo achila. Ve'achalta is referring to achila. V'savata zo shtia. Ve'achila bekazayis, and therefore we know that since it's talking about, it says v'rach, you have to bench, right? So it says you have to have an achila. So an achila, and the shear of achila is a kazayis. So therefore you have to do a zimun with a kazayis. Rabbi Yehuda saver ve'achalta v'savata. What does it mean v'achalta v'savata? It's not referring to drinking. Right? Achalta v'zavata is describing the type of achila. Achila sheyesh basviya, right? Eating that one becomes satiated from, right? One becomes full from, right? And what is that? Zekabetza. That's larger. That's the amount of an egg, right? So therefore, when you do a zimun, you have to have your large something to make you full. Make you full is the size of a kabetza. Now, what's the proof here? Now remember, when it comes to the Isser of Yom Kippurim, we said, what's the shear? It doesn't do with eating. It has to do with the fact of what will inflict, uncomfortable, to make you uncomfortable, right? So he said that was the amount, right, where a person no longer has hunger pains, right? If you're telling me that the shear that the Chachamim say is a koseves or halachah mashmisina has to be size of a large fig is more than a kibetza, it's the hashta beit kibetza sevui masviei daita lo miyasve. I understand. So kibetza makes you full because it requires you to bench, but it doesn't put your mind at ease. Doesn't make any sense, right? Obviously, when you eat, right, first your mind is at ease because I'm not starving. Then you become full, right? So obviously, the amount of Yom Kippur, right, to eating is less than making you full. It's just something to take away the hunger pains. So if the amount to make you full was a kibetza, then obviously we don't need to become full to be for it to be asur on Yom Kippur. It has to be less than that. It has to be amount to basically to take away the hunger pains. So if you would think, but eating the kibetza, right, can make you full, but it wouldn't put your mind at ease. Of course, it would put your mind at ease because your mind becomes at ease before you become full while you're eating. Rather than that, we must say that the koseves hagasa, that which we say, is less than a kibetza because it doesn't make you full; it just removes the pains. And kibetza masvia koseves miyasve daita. Therefore, right, that which you have an egg, kibetza makes you full, but that koseves removes the hunger pains, and therefore, it is no longer inui. So therefore, the shear of inui koseves is less than a kibetza, and that we see from this source over here. All right, we'll stop here. Yeah.
Yeah.